Hello everyone and welcome back to some Hearthstone decks for hire, and I'm going to be changing the structure of these videos just a little bit so that you get the basic concept of the deck, and then we're going to go into a few games to exemplify what I've been talking about. So this deck is the Demon Zoo deck, and what's really cool about this deck is that it's a hybrid deck. So that means it can be very aggressive early on, as well as be aggressive later on in the game, almost mirroring a mid-range type deck. So what that means is the first half of this deck is very aggressive, while the last half of this deck, as you can look at the cards, they're more aggressive later on and aren't really really low mana cost like Zoo. However, this deck does have a bit of Zoo in it and a bit of mid-range, which is what makes it that hybrid deck. This makes it very important to understand or to identify what your opponent's deck is. Is it an aggression deck or is it a mid-range deck? Because the reason that this is a hybrid deck means that it can play aggressively very early on, but it can also play very slowly and gradually build up to a mid-game aggression. So it's a very adaptable deck. If your opponent is playing early aggression, like a Zoo deck, then you would try and play, in terms of the beginning of the game, very endurance heavy. So you're just sort of biding your time until you hit your mid-range aggression, where you get your Void Callers out, your Doom Guards, your Dr. Boom, your Sylvanas out to really punish a Zoo player. And if your opponent is playing mid-range, you can easily bring out a lot of aggression early on. The Flame Imp, the Void Walkers, the Haunted Creepers, especially the Knife Jugglers, and then of course Implosion, to really do a lot of damage early on. And not only that, this deck does not run out of steam like normal Zoo decks do. Like when you hit around turn 6, 7, and 8, you still have big chunky units that you can use, the Doom Guard and your Dr. Boom, to continue the pressure where Zoo would normally fall. Remember, you can't play aggression against an aggression deck with this deck, because this deck sacrifices being specialized within the aggression style early on in order to be able to be aggressive in both the early game and the mid game. But of course, that's what makes this deck unique. The other classes, unfortunately, can't generate enough card draw, and their class cards cannot hold enough board presence to do this same kind of hybrid deck type. The Warlock Hero Power is perfect for this because it gives you that card draw in exchange for health management, and the Warlock class cards provide disproportionate board presence, involving Implosion, Imp Gang Boss, and Void Caller. You'll notice that there are very few spells in this deck. However, these spells have very specific roles. Power Overwhelming is the Zoo spell that is intended to kill your opponent, but it also works really well with all of the Death Rattle in this deck. And of course, Bane of Doom and Implosion are control-style cards, spells that are used to gain tempo. Both Sylvanas and Dr. Boom both can be replaced if needed in this deck, but they fulfill a very important tempo and finisher role in this deck. Notable replacements include Mal'Ganis, Jaraxxus, the Black Knight, or Illidan Stormrage, because all of these cards either give you more tempo or can act as very powerful finishers in the game. Now I'm going to go over some notable combos that you should be aware of before playing this deck. I will say first off though, most of the combos in this deck are not really that necessary. The power of this deck comes from the fact that it can change between an early aggression deck and a mid-game deck, and these combos are simply there to strengthen all of the minions that you have already, and they're very powerful on their own. These combos include the Knife Juggler and Implosion, which will deal at most 4 knives to the opponent, as well as deal 4 damage, and of course give you 4 imps. The Knife Juggler in combination with the Haunted Creeper will, when the Haunted Creeper dies, it will spawn 2 Spectral Spiders, and that will of course activate the Knife Juggler's ability. The Nerubian Egg matched with the Defender of Argus, the Abusive Sergeant, as well as Power Overwhelming can be a great tempo starter. And the Void Caller and any other demon in your hand, which will most likely be either an Imp Gang Boss or better. For the most part, there's only 2 Void Walkers in this deck and 1 Flame Imp, and that's pretty much the worst you can get. So with that, let's see how this deck works in a practical setting. Alright, so we're going into this first game, and I'm really excited because we love Hearthstone. So this is going to be a bit more of a practical look into the Demon Zoo deck. And right off the bat, look at our information. We know we're against a hunter. So our first question to think about is what kind of hunters are being played right now. For the most part, we don't want a Voidwalker. Again, the Voidwalker is a later game mid-range type card. We want to get our aggression cards first off so that if we need to, we can play them aggressively, or we can play them in an endurance method. So what kind of decks are the hunters playing nowadays? Well, at the moment I believe it's mid-range hunter, and I think there's like a hybrid hunter out there, but face hunter seems to be the most popular, so I'm gonna assume for the most part that this is going to be a face hunter deck. Unfortunately, because Hearthstone is a game that does have a lot of, you know, unknown factors to it that you have to try and figure out as the game progresses, a lot of RNG, you do need to play with the odds. And the odds right now, at least, and this is why knowing the metagame is so important, knowing the odds, you're going to have to use those odds to your advantage. So Haunted Creeper, it's looking good to be a face hunter. I believe Haunted Creeper is in that deck. However, a variant of hunter from a long time ago called the Death Rattle Hunter, it's still possible that this could be a Death Rattle Hunter. So that's what I'm thinking right now as I'm going through this. Again, still playing kind of aggressive, because if this is a mid-range deck, then we need to be doing some damage to him, so that until he gives us some kind of recognition or some kind of sign that this is a aggression deck. So Quick Shot. Okay, so Quick Shot is a card that I'm kind of thinking face hunter now, because as your opponent plays cards, they're going to start revealing what kind of deck they have. And as a result, I'm really thinking face hunter now. And as a result of that, I want to sort of slow him down, right? I want to slow him down. And we see a second Quick Shot. That's pretty indicative of a face hunter. We see an Annoyatron. That's not indicative of a face hunter. So when you start seeing what your opponent's playing, you're going to start realizing that since we're only at the rank, I believe this is 15, people don't have all of the cards that they need for whatever deck that they're playing. And some people might just throw in, you know, some cards because they think they're good, right? An Annoyatron. Not necessarily a card that you see in face hunters or in the standard face hunter deck, but here it is, right? So we got to be able to deal with it. All the while, I'm still waiting. I'm still waiting because for the most part, this looks like an aggression deck. And so I have to commit to that slightly and start collecting some cards to be able to play a mid-range type style. Because if I just play an aggressive style, the aggression deck is going to win out against me because I'm only a half aggression, half mid-range deck. That's right, I'm a hybrid deck. And there, of course, a Wolf Rider, very indicative of... of course, a Wolf Rider that hits me in the face is indicative of an aggression deck. So now I'm pretty certain now. I can commit to the aggression style. So right now what we're going to do is, as you can see here, we're going to control the board. We're going to do our best to control the board, and pretty much hitting either of those two is great. As you can see now, the problem with most aggressive decks is that they run out of cards very fast. However, for us, we can still be aggressive and still have a lot of cards because of our hero power. And a Doomsayer, again, we're gonna see some weird. You're gonna see some weird deck combinations on the ladder. You can't just look on Liquid Hearth and see these deck lists and be like, all right, this is the deck I'm gonna be playing with. No, you're gonna be playing against some weird stuff. And unfortunately for this hunter, the Knife Juggler, we're gonna give him a sorry. Because, honestly, when that happens to me, that hurts pretty hard. And, of course, a Leper Gnome. Ah, very important. The Leper Gnome, if you ever see a Leper Gnome, a Leper Gnome, I'm so mouth farting right now. But a leper gnome, if you ever see a leper gnome come out on turn 1, you can immediately say that your opponent is of an aggressive deck. Why? Because any card that attacks the face directly is trying to end the game faster. So any any responsible player making a good deck, what they'll want to do is they'll want to build a deck that synergizes well with the cards that they have already. And if they've got a leper gnome in there already that's hitting the face, dealing 2 damage when it dies to the face, then they're probably going to be a pretty aggressive deck, because there's no point in doing 2 damage to the face to the opponent at turn 1 or turn 2 if you're not going to kill them really fast, because you're just giving your opponent more time to adjust to that play. So as you can see here, we identified that it was a aggression deck. We played to that strength, and we went to the mid-range style of our deck, and pretty much with our Defender of Argus, we're just buffing our stuff. So honestly, it looks kind of like a zoo deck here, but we played a little bit less aggressive early on, so that now, look how aggressive we can be. And now we're just kind of waiting for our opponent to leave. And of course he's going to kill himself, which is well played right there. So that was a very simple game against a very simple deck. A deck that goes for the face. It had some weird cards in there, but we got around them. And that's really the strength of this deck. It's very adaptable, and so it allows you to get around a lot of weird situations that you might run into. And so now here we're against a mage. So what mages are playing right now? I believe it's a mid-range mage. I think mid-range is the mage deck that's being played right now. So this is why it's very important, and of course getting the Voidwalker out at turn 1, that is the dream of this deck. You don't really want an Abusive Sergeant out first because you can't use its ability, but the Voidwalker out, first off, makes it better for these Void Callers, because that means we're not going to have a Voidwalker in our hand. And pretty much, yeah, it's a pretty good turn 1. So as the cards come out, we begin to slot in what kind of deck this is, and it's really looking like a Secrets mage deck. However, Mad Scientist and Secrets are part of, I think, almost every mage deck. So I'm trying. We've silenced it for now because I'm not really quite sure if there's anything else that we would need to silence that would be more deadly than the amount of tempo that a Mad Scientist can give you. The Flame Walker, oh, so we see a Flame Walker. This is really important because that means that this is one of the Flame Walker decks. Right? Flame Walker deck is a mid-range mage deck. So unfortunately, we didn't really get many of our aggressive cards early on in the game, so we're kind of forced to play a mid-range against this kind of mid-range deck, this mage mid-range deck. Try and say that one 4 times fast. But yeah, pretty much it's not the best scenario, but it's kind of what we have to do. And here we have a great opportunity to use our Bane of Doom as well as get some board presence. And this is gonna happen a lot, okay? I love this card. I love Bane of Doom. And the reason for that is that it's a card that kills off, or is intended, like, you would never use this card just to do 2 damage. Or else you shouldn't use the card at all. You do 2 damage to something, you kill it, and then you get something in return. And for the most part, I think you get like an 80%, like it's good. 80% of the time it's good, because you really only need something for about 3 mana or more. So that's the Felguards. Pretty much the Felguard taunt, or better, is everything that you want from that card. And of course, Jiraxis and Mal'Ganis are the two best cards that you could possibly get from that. The other possibilities are a Doom Guard as well, and you'll immediately get Charge with it. Something I cannot confirm or deny at this moment is whether or not you can get the Imps. And there are actually two types of Imps. There's the Implosion Imps, as you see on the screen right now, and there's also the Imp Master Imps, and they're actually different cards, but they're both labeled demons. Thirdly, there's also an imp called the Worthless Imp, and I don't know whether or not you can get it, but it's labeled as a demon, so technically, according to the wording of the card, you should be able to. So if anyone can confirm or deny that, that would be great. So for the most part, this deck, I'm not really quite sure what to think of this mage deck. Again, you're going to be going against these kinds of decks that, like, you don't really know what they are, because they're almost like, they're decks that are in the meta, but then they don't have all the cards, so they stick in all these other weird cards. So I'm going to go ahead and just assume that this is a secret deck that has not played any secrets. And pretty much we've mid-ranged them to death. Oh, there's a secret. So, but the thing is that when you can Bane of Doom out Jiraxis at turn 5, there really isn't that much you can do against a 315. I mean, a 315 isn't that great because it just has a lot of health, but that's just the thing. It has a lot of health and it just slowly whittles away damage. But Jiraxis can also give you so much tempo, because now the mage can't really throw out anything that has 3 health, because Jiraxis is going to kill it, and because he has so much health, he's just going to tempo his way through. And our mage is getting desperate. He's using his fireballs, everything he can. He only has 3 cards, and we only have 2, but we have a powerful board, and I'm not quite sure if he's waiting for Flame Strike or not, but that's not going to save him from Jiraxis, right? Because Jiraxis still has double-digit health. And because of that, we're going to throw out our Void Terror so that we can get a high health creature on the board, so that Flame Strike really eats up all his mana. And there you go. Pretty much winning the game for us when he sees that. Alright, off to a third game. And as you can see from those last 2 games, this deck does really well against aggression and mid-ranged decks. And because it's Zoo, you just overwhelm your opponent. Because of those really disproportionate decks, or those disproportionate cards like Implosion, Imp Gang Boss. You know, these cards that give you a ton of board presence. And even though they're only 1/1s, it's still enough for your opponent has to get through all of it, right? So this game, we're up against a warrior, and the most prominent warrior nowadays is of course the Grim Patron. There really is only there's only 2 warrior type decks, honestly. Right now, with the Grim Patron and the Control Warrior, really are the only 2 options that people play. There was some OTK variant for Warrior a while back. There was some Pirates deck that you could do, which was insanely powerful during its time, but it's not really used at all anymore. So for the most part, in terms of playing the odds, it's pretty safe to assume that this is a Grim Patron Warrior. And it's very easy to figure out if it's a Grim Patron Warrior. Fiery War Axe out at turn 2 is not that indicative of it between that and Control Warrior yet. However, what you'll notice is that a Control Warrior will constantly want to armor up, whereas a Grim Patron Warrior is not going to want to armor up. They want to get their stuff out onto the board, because for one, that allows them to use Battle Rage later on to get some cards when they damage all of their creatures or their minions. But for 2, a Grim Patron Warrior wants to get stuff out on the field because the Grim Patron Warrior needs to control the board just a little bit, whereas a Control Warrior doesn't necessarily need to do that. They know they have cards like Shield. Is it Shield Block? I can't remember what it is. it's the 3 mana, gives you 5 armor and a card, right? And that card pretty much acts as a turn staller. So an Acolyte of Pain, not a huge tell again, but it's reminiscent of both decks. But honestly, would a Control Warrior do that, or would they use that shield card? I'm not really quite sure. A Cruel Taskmaster coming out. We're still on the cusp of figuring out whether or not this is a Control Warrior, but I think the Whirlwind there is a big indication that this is a Grim Warrior, a Grim Patron Warrior, and the Dread Corsair. Instantly, right there, we can confirm that it is the Grim Patron Warrior, so we can start playing a little bit more aggressively now, because we know that the Grim Patron Warrior is a mid-type deck that focuses on around turns 5 to 7, and we need to kind of kill him around that time. So technically, we can actually play, and this is unfortunate, our implosion didn't work out. Unfortunately, that's the luck of the draw of RNG. We can play a little bit more aggressively now, because we need to get him down so that we can kill him around turn 5 to 7, because that's when the Grim Patron Warrior starts bringing out the Grim Patrons and the Warsong Commanders and all of that. So that's pretty much what we want to do right now. So we're going to control the board a little bit, make sure he doesn't go too crazy with all of his creatures. He's sort of doing the same thing to us, which is very interesting, but we're going to be able to activate our Nubian Egg this turn. I'm probably thinking whether or not I should life tap and Haunted Creeper.
Get in there and fight, maggot.
But instead what we're going to do is we're going to be a little bit mana inefficient. And again, being mana inefficient is probably the best thing that you can do if you're going to do something wrong. So being mana inefficient isn't that bad. If you're like missing 1 mana, it's not that big of a deal. Death's Bite has come out, and he's going to take 4 damage there, but he's also going to do 1 damage to everything in the next turn, which makes our Imp Gang boss pretty useless. So the Death's Bite is actually a really good card that counters the Imp Gang boss. So we're going to life tap here because we've got a lot of health. We're going to bring out our Haunted Creeper. Why? Because he doesn't really have anything that can kill it, and it's going to survive the Death's Bite. So we're just trying to figure out whether or not we want to play it. The Flame Imp is sort of something we can just sort of throw out there. The Imp Gang boss, we're just going to grab another Imp because we just want to kill off that Armor Smith. So pretty much during execution, all you really need to deal with is figuring out what deck it is, what deck you're playing against. And as a result, you can then change the way you play certain cards. Imp Gang boss, now we need to use it as an aggressive card rather than a mid-range card, because we're against a mid-range deck. So if we just play mid-range against a mid-range, our mid-range is going to be worse because our mid-range just, it was never specialized, right? We've got these cards like Flame Imp and Void Walkers that are not going to help us in the mid game. It is possible, however, to beat a mid-range deck with our mid-range deck. It's possible, it's just not likely. And, you know, we're playing Hearthstone, which is a card game that has RNG in it and has, you know, top decking involved and different decks that have been made specifically for certain things. In terms of the luck of the draw, we shouldn't win, but it's possible. So that's why I always say, you know, stick into the game. Don't just leave if you think that your opponent, you know, has the best cards. He might not have the best cards that he needs to defeat you. So we can see that our opponent is just trying to get cards right now. He's using his Gnomish Inventors. So what's really cool here is that we know that he doesn't have the combo. We know he doesn't have the combo because he's still trying to get cards. So that's a really cool indication of whether or not we can get those cards or not. Whether or not we can endure through his OTK, right? The weakness to an OTK is surviving the OTK, and then you win. Alright, so here we've got an opportunity to play our Bane of Doom. We love Bane of Doom. Oh my gosh. we got Juraxis again. The Ironbeak Owl, very, very important card in this deck. It is actually one of the most important cards in this deck. Learn how to use it well. Learn how to time when you're going to use it. Because don't just throw it out like against an Armor Smith. Because you don't really care about the Armor Smith. The Owl is going to be great for getting past taunts or getting past big legendary cards like Gramash Hellscream that we see right here. So if we go back to reading the deck, reading our opponent's deck right now, or at least his hand, we know he doesn't have the cards necessary for the combo. So we're going to assume he doesn't have either a Grim Patron or he doesn't have the Warsong Commander, because he's only got 3 cards and he's still been trying to get card draw. So we're going to throw up our Defender of Argus, you know, give ourselves a little bit more protection. And this protection isn't so much to protect our health, it's to keep our health high so that we can kill ourselves by life tapping, because we only have 2 cards too. And just trading effectively right now. We're gonna Void Terror these 2 cards so that we can get our Spectral Spiders out. I believe he has 1 Whirlwind left, so maybe that wasn't the best decision to make, but for the most part, he only has 4 cards. Does he have the combo? That's the real question. We're at turn 10 now. This is really lucky for us, because we haven't killed him yet. And in fact, he has got a lot of health. So, for the most part, you know, you play each game individually on its own. You can't really go into a game and go, oh, Grim Patron Warrior, you know, we're gonna lose. Nope, this could happen, where he still doesn't have the cards that he needs. Oh, he does have a Grim Patron out and a Frothing Berserker, so he had those 2 cards, but he did not have his Warsong Commander. And this is a bit of a misplay by him, because, or he's assuming that I'm actually able to kill him. So right now I'm just thinking, should I Implosion? And it doesn't work out for us. Oh no. This is kind of a difficult situation, because we've got to kill the Unstable Ghoul, which is going to do 1 damage to everything, and that's going to create another Grim Patron. So oh man, this is actually not looking very good. So for the most part, we can use Juraxis to kill off the taunt. Oh man, this is pretty rough. We have to use Juraxis to kill off the taunt, and then we have to use the Void Terror to kill off the Frothing Berserker, or else it's going to do way too much damage. But there is something good in all of this, because this means he's going to lose his Frothing Berserker, which is the main component of the Warrior, the Grim Patron's strategy, right? The whole point of this deck is to get a bunch of Grim Patrons out, bring out the Warsong Commander, bring out the Frothing Berserker, use a Whirlwind, damage everything, and then suddenly you've got like a 15 damage to 20 damage Frothing Berserker that can immediately attack because it has charge. You know, that's pretty good. And right here, why did we throw out the Knife Juggler? Just because it has 3 damage. We need to get rid of these Grim Patrons. That's really the main focus right now. So what are those 2 cards? We're hoping it's not a Whirlwind. I can't remember if you used the second Whirlwind or not. But armoring up is definitely a desperate move by this hunter, or not by the hunter, by this warrior. The second Grim Patron comes out, and he's going to lose his Gramash Hellscream, but he's going to keep his Grim Patrons. The Void Color, not a good card for us, but we can kill off these Grim Patrons very well. So, ooh, and we've got Sylvanas, which is great, because again, when you're against the Grim Patron Warrior, you just want cards higher than 3 damage. So he can't really throw anything at us right now without those Grim Patrons dying. And he's got Death's Bite. I'm not really quite sure how that's going to help, unless that's a Whirlwind. And he's just going to go for face, and we're actually at 1 health. This is a little frightening. Coming in here, we got the Doom Guard. We've got our Void Walker, which is going to be great. So this is the strategy we have right now. If you can see it, we're going to kill off the 2 Grim Patrons, which completely shuts down this warrior's plan, we know he's got one Frothing Berserker in his deck, and he's got Warsong Commanders. So the Voidwalker is going to protect us from dying, and we're going to throw out our Doomguard and get rid of the Pit Lord, because the Pit Lord just does damage to us, our face, and we can't afford to do that. And the Doomguard is going to do tons of damage to the opponent. And we're hoping right now, we're really praying right now that he doesn't have Slam or something. He doesn't have a direct damage card. Or he can't, there you go, he can't kill our Voidwalker with anything in his hand. And of course he's armoring up, which is great. He's gonna do 1 damage. We're gonna take 1 damage. Dr. Boom's gonna come out. Oh my gosh, if he has a weapon. If he has a weapon, we've lost. He's got 2 cards. So this is where the fun begins, you know. There's no more analysis to be had in this deck. This is where the fun begins, when you play against the strongest deck in the metagame right now. Whirlwind coming out. He's gonna try his luck with the bombs, and the bombs do a mighty 7 damage. We just got Power Overwhelming, which we didn't even need, and there's the game. So yeah. Alright, so going into the pros and cons, this is a really fun deck, the Demon Zoo deck, and it's fairly stable. It has a fairly high win rate for what it can do. And because it is allowed to be both aggressive early and mid-game, it becomes this kind of a hybrid, which is really good in the meta right now, because there's a lot of early game aggression decks and a lot of mid-range aggression decks, and this deck allows you to account for both of them. And of course, Bane of Doom is just hella fun to play. Good luck on the ladder as you deal 2 damage, kill off a creature on the board, and then get Jiraxis or Mal'Ganis or a Doomguard or any assortment of demons that is great. However, if anyone out there can possibly confirm that you can get the imps or the Worthless Imp, that would be a great help as well. On the cons, the hero power is absolutely necessary, so keep an eye on your health. If you're against a very aggressive deck, you might not be able to life tap as much, so be a little bit more conservative with your cards. And also, this deck is extremely susceptible to silence cards, because if you look at the deck, there's a lot of Death Rattle. There's a lot of abilities, like the Knife Juggler has, where the ability it's not a battle cry, so you play the card and then its ability continues happening over time, right? Dr. Boom gives you the 2 bombs, so then the bombs can be silenced as well. So be a little careful against, say, the Druid class, because the Druid class will probably have Keepers of the Grove handy. So try and bait those out whenever you can. So, what do you think about this new variation of the Zoo deck involving demons? Let me know in the comments below, like and subscribe for more. And if you haven't tried this new variation of Zoo yet, start now.